Welcome to the Born Unbreakable podcast. We are your hosts, Coach Des and DJ F&A.
That's me.
That's him. Welcome back. This is our first official episode covering our topic where we get to deep dive. Last time you got to get to know us a little bit better and the format that the show is moving into. So very excited about that. But what you can expect from us today is to dive into the subject matter of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a lot of passion behind this subject. We're going to kick off with a couple of headlines, dig into the topic, and then end with a few takeaways and a tip of the week.
Oh, we're digging in. We are definitely digging in today. But before we dig in, I do want to apologize to all of our listeners who heard the last episode. It was horrible because I think it was our first one and we're trying to get all this content out. And, it was the first time we were using everything. So I was like running the video, the sound, doing everything. And it was horrible. I think, and then I was not able to do so much at one time. I don't know if it's because I'm a guy. We can't really
Probably.
We can't multitask as good as women, but I think I have it now. I think I'm good.
Better you than me, because we would never get past the first 2 minutes if I tried to push any kind of buttons. So I commend you for being able to jump back and forth between the technical aspects and the fundamental part of talking about important stuff.
Yes, this is going to be a better show. So I apologize for our listeners for the first episode.
But that's the growing pains, right? We have to be honest.
And it was painful.
So we have to be honest about the growth of what happens. This is what it feels like when you're growing a brand, a show, and everything else. But we wanted to start with some key headlines. There's been some interesting things in the news. I know Aaron has a few references for us. One is a case that's a lawsuit, in fact, that's going on right now from a conservative activist named Edward Blum. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. So Aaron will talk about that. And for the sports fans out there, and even if you're not a sports fan, I think it's been pretty prominent that Deion Sanders has taken over as a coach that is making some waves, I'd say, in the media.
Yes, and the reason why we picked these two, we always want to pick a couple of headlines, that's going on to kind of paint a better picture when we're talking about our topics. And this Deion Sanders story, he's taken over the media, which is really good for college football. It's good for Colorado University. Mm-hmm. But anytime people, go against a tradition, make a little noise, are a little different, it's always going to ruffle up some feathers somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you can see that's happening. Mm-hmm. Muhammad Ali back in the 60s, when he came out fighting, when they interviewed him, he was a young guy who was just quick on the tongue, saying all this stuff. Pretty much like, I feel like that's when rapping kind of started.
Yeah.
I feel like we have to give Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali, some credit there. But again, you see all this throughout history, and this is where you see a contradiction. And I'll point that out, what I mean by that later. But this Deion Sanders story, one, I am a Dallas Cowboy fan. Was a Deion Sanders fan. My number was 21 too, as an homage to him. So it's been really exciting for me to see him. Now, yes, being someone who likes tradition, I noticed that there is a difference, because when you play collegiate sports, a lot of people want young men to be young men, with the way they dress, the way they carry themselves. Once you get into the NFL, then you can do you, But Deion Sanders is kind of bringing that down to college sports, especially football. And there's a couple of reasons why that's okay, because the universities are making millions off these kids. Millions. You're talking about TV deals and video games and merchandise. Mm-hmm. So they just passed this, I believe, was it a couple of years ago? I want to say 2021, mm-hmm. Maybe wrong, but it was the name, image, and likeness. So now college players can now make money off their name. Now we had Reggie Bush, We had what's the guy from Texas A&M?
Oh, Johnny Manziel. Yeah, the Netflix special.
That's a good
right
one.
now.
And that was the whole thing about that, about college players making some money, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So now that you have that, obviously you need to have people like Deion Sanders, you know, coming down and because it is a business, it is changing.
Mm-hmm.
So this change is getting a lot of coaches a little annoyed because it is different. You have, you know, prime time coming down, you know, and when you watch his stuff, he is who he is, but he's not making it all about him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he always puts it on the kids, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he was coming in and was just all about him and he wasn't winning games, all right, you know what I mean? But he is proving that, you know, his method is working.
Mm-hmm.
So I like it. And now here's the thing. So they played TCU.
Okay.
And it was, okay, is this all a hoopla? You know, what's the Deion Sanders experiment about? You know, you were in playing in the black colleges.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he won. People thinking, oh, well, you know, you got a couple of star recruits. That's not really a very competitive league or division. So he comes up to Division I, beats TCU, who was a runner-up in the national championship last year.
Mm-hmm.
Then, okay, week 2. We got Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a powerful team. You know, traditionally that team has been really good. They take care of them. Colorado State is not a really good team right now. So I can see why, you know, you see Deion coming for you. You know, you're like, oh, we want to play Deion Sanders in Colorado. You know what I mean? You know, you might, the chance of winning is very slim. So you're a little annoyed. And then on top of that, you got to hear Deion Sanders come in and talk, you know. So I get it. I get this, coaches, but I'm gonna play for you guys. And I'm pretty sure many of you guys, if you guys are into the sports world, you guys will have already seen this. But those of you that are not, you know, this is an example of a coach. And maybe the reaction to a lot of coaches. See, now, here's the thing. This guy just said what's on his mind.
Jay Norville, right?
And I like that. You know, say what you want to say. You know, a lot of these people, they kind of throw shade, you know, in a small way. But, you know, this guy said it, and I think he's going to pay the price.
Yeah, be careful the words you choose.
So let's just play this for you guys so you guys know what we're talking about. Here we go.
ESPN videos, and it was great. I loved it. But our kids came out of those videos really with a chip on their shoulder. They're tired of all that stuff. They really are tired of it. And I sat down with ESPN today, and I don't care if they hear it in Boulder. I told them I took my hat off and I took my glasses off, and I said, when I talk to grown-ups, I take my hat and my glasses off. That's what my mother taught me. So, you know, they're not going to like us no matter what we say or do. It doesn't matter, okay?
I did 2 videos.
Okay, so let your reaction to that. What do you get from that?
Okay, so, well, first of all, the context of the situation, right? So just to summarize what you just explained, is there is a backdrop in the college football arena of a certain standard.
Yes.
Deion Sanders, who's a former football player, sports player, famous player, becomes a coach. And what I think is that he disrupts a norm. So my reaction to that comment is that he's throwing shade to Deion Sanders because when he speaks, he wears a hat and he wears shades.
He's got swag.
He's got swag.
You know?
And that's
do many coaches have swag?
No. And that's what my point was going to be is so when you are the minority and things you bring something different to the table, it shakes things up and it causes people to pay attention to you for better or for worse.
Do you think it's a racial thing?
I think it can be perceived as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when I saw that, and you've been seeing this for the past couple of weeks, from the very beginning, I felt that that's what it was. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, Deion, the way, and we're going to talk about this, you know, why D.E.I., you know.
Right, we'll get into it.
But if you look at everything else going around in the country, and then this pops up, I mean, for me, it is. I feel like it is a racial thing, you know, because you start talking about it. Because when Dion was coming up, he was talking about how there wasn't enough black coaches. There wasn't those opportunities. You know, there was coaches that were being passed up for jobs, you know. Now, it could be, and I know you say this a lot, unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Some of these coaches and people that, you know, that are hiring we can't sit there and call them racist. They're not doing it deliberately, you know. But if you do, I mean, I'll tell you right now, you know, looking at as a Dallas Cowboy fan, you got Jimmy Johnson, you know, and then Barry Switzer came in, Tom Landry, Mike Ditka, Nick Saban. Notice how you see the trend. I mean, for me, I'm naming off a bunch of coaches. So to me, I understand that when you're trying to put together a winning football team, you're trying to find a coach that's like, you know, you're trying to get like, what's the qualification? And that might be an unconscious bias.
Right. And what is the trend of those coaches?
Yeah.
They're white, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it could be an unconscious bias thing. But then when you see a coach come out and say something like this, then you go, okay,
that's very direct. And on top of that, you throw in "my mother taught me," as if it was now we're talking about upbringing.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many ways that you can construe those comments.
What I liked about that comment too, because you had Shannon Sharp and Stephen A. Smith talk about it.
I love those guys.
And he said, and I think they were talking to, I don't know if they talked to Dion. I think they were talking to Dion, but he goes, you know, that's great. Like his mom, he raised him right. No, I think it was Shannon Sharp. I'm not sure who it was, but yeah, because I have to go back and look at it.
One of those commentators.
I don't know if it was Dion or Shannon or Stephen A. Smith that said, you know, that's good that it was raised like that, but also Deion Sanders had a good mama too, and she said, "Baby, do you?"
Yeah, right.
You know, so yeah, it goes to that, you know, where you come from. You know, to Deion Sanders, it may not be disrespectful. He's just doing him,
right?
You know, but at the same time, when he does all these interviews, he's one thing I did like is that in this last interview that he was with Shannon and Steven, he did say, you know, it's not a one thing he loves about it is that everybody around there, it's not a black and white thing, you know, it's a we thing. You know, he went out there on game day, you know, first home game, and he looked down the stands, and it was a Colorado crowd, not a black and white crowd. So I think he's handling it really well.
Yeah.
You know, but he, at the same time, he's doing it with grace. He's opening doors, breaking barriers, but not doing it in a way to cause disruption.
But I think he's been very honest to point out the fact that he is different.
Yes.
So I think that's something to keep in mind. So that was a great example of current events, sports. A lot of people can relate. What about the other example that we wanted to talk about, the lawsuit? Yeah,
definitely. So this right here, I was watching The View. Shout out to The View. I like it.
He loves it.
Yeah. I'm a View viewer. And it's so funny too, because a lot of people don't like that.
The View.
Who are like on the right, they, you know.
Yeah.
But I've always liked it because they always had a conservative voice on there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point, right?
And they have those dinner room talks where you got white, black, conservative, liberal, someone gay, someone who's bi. They've had a lot of different people on there.
Lots of diverse.
And it's always been a good thing.
Hosts.
So this, I saw this story, and it was so interesting because there is a group, Atlanta-based venture capital group, who has put together a program to support Black-owned businesses. They've been able to put together, I believe it's like $100 million, and they give grants
to female entrepreneurs who are Black women.
And this will go on with, and I know you know more about this, where, you know, Bloom, he is an activist for, the affirmative action. He's anti-affirmative action. And that's been a topic for about a decade here, you know, a couple of decades. Comedian Chris Rock, I know he talks about this, you know, one of his specials back in the day, he goes, you know, they're saying, you know, that's not fair, affirmative action. He's like, you know, he said, I don't believe I should get a position ahead of a white person because I'm Black. But if it's a tie, fuck them. So, going back to this, Bloom is suing this group now.
Called the Fearless Fund, right?
Yes. And they're trying to get away with this because they're saying that they're discriminating now. Like so you're only going to help black people. And it was very interesting because they're being represented by Crum, the lawyer. So he was coming out and saying that, there's, out of all the venture capital that's given out, there's only like, before this group, it was 0.003, something like that. And this group moved it to 0.03. And because of that,
which is still a small percentage, but
a
shift in the positive direction nonetheless.
And this is I don't know, and you have to come in on this, because for me, I get really passionate about this because it's I don't know if people understand or know history of what this country has done since its inception, And there has been a lot of, what would you call, racial disparities. There's been a lot of stuff that's gone on that has made it harder for black people or minorities.
Absolutely.
There's when you talk about housing, when you talk about money, wealth.
And statistics show that when it comes to equity,
Yes.
access to housing, access to education, for example, the numbers still predominantly are that there's more whites,
Yeah.
right? And so the intention of many different diversity programs is to create access, better access for those who have historically not had it or have had less of it. So this particular example about this lawsuit is interesting because for many years, there have been lots of organizations that have created foundations, funds. There's the NAACP. I mean, we could sit here and talk about a lot of examples of groups that are out there to support minorities or LGBT or certain groups of people to provide them with more access. The genesis that is helping this lawsuit, which we'll talk about further as we're about to segue into the DEI topic for this episode, is the fact that there are now efforts to ban, DEI initiatives in public colleges, and because of that, you're trying to take this example from public education and apply it to the corporate setting, and it's going to be interesting to see how that precedent is affecting other parts of society, right?
Yeah. Now let's go the definition of affirmative action, because I like to do this. This way, when people hear affirmative action, we want to educate and help people understand this. So when you get into your debates, you're trying to understand stuff. We want to give you as much as you can. Affirmative action in the United States is the active effort to improve employment, educational, and other opportunities for members of groups that have been subjected to discrimination. Criteria for affirmative action include race, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, ethnic origin, and age. So again, it's recognizing that the United States has done stuff in the past that have led to inequality, which still shows today. And that's a way to kind of make a right, make that right.
Right.
Now, I understand, when I don't know if affirmative action came to be.
And so,
this was in the 1960s.
That's right, because of civil rights.
So let's go. Okay, so it's been 60 years.
Yes.
Is it something where maybe people who are white feel like, okay, 60 years, come on, like enough is enough?
No, and
You know what I mean?
and here's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, all of this is valid.
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about something like white privilege, it's a real thing. So there has to be acknowledged of that. Does it mean that for the rest of time, white people should be apologizing for the things that their ancestors did 60, 100, 200 years ago? No. However, the acknowledgement needs to be there. And the fact is that we still haven't gotten to a place, AKA George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, we could go on with many examples, where we are behaving as a society where people are treated equally.
Yeah.
So the reason there's still the perpetuation of programs that promote DEI initiatives is because of that fact. It's just a fact. It's not about if you agree with it or you don't agree with it. The numbers speak for themselves. If you look at the population of our country and how many minorities are actually becoming a majority, look at the Latino population as an example. And Blacks, there's that access that I was talking about, like housing and education, it's still not equal. And so that we have to determine how we're going to address that. And as part of my job as a consultant at a firm, I currently have a number of clients across the country that I'm helping to improve these efforts in their institutions because they recognize that there's disparities and they want to know how they can proactively work towards creating better access, for employees to have opportunities to work, and regardless of your race, your gender, and all those things, and also for patients that access healthcare so they're not disenfranchised because of their race or economic condition to have the same access as, their neighbors.
No, you bring up a good point when you say the minorities are becoming the majority. So you have a big population boom in the Latino community, and other people coming in from other countries. Whether you have like a Muslim background, you have, a lot of the South American countries are coming in. We're growing, which is a beautiful thing. But here's the thing. Someone who has been born, let's say in the 2000s, they're about 21 right now. And they're growing up going, oh, well, I have a lot of Latinos and Blacks in my class. I have a couple of friends, I see a lot of hip hop artists making money. I see Jay-Z, we had Barack Obama going, well, in my lifetime, it's been pretty good for Black people, minorities or Latinos. And then you go and apply for college and then they go, well, someone got it over me because, so I see how, in recent history, but at the same time, then you look at something like, Colin Kaepernick, a guy who just was peacefully, respectfully protesting. And he had the president of the United States, talk shit to him and say, fire that son of a bitch.
Well, and it got so big that it was on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah. And then, when George Floyd happens, when that happens, you go, it's very interesting the times we live in, because on the one hand, you can see great progress. Yes. Do we have whites only water fountains? Are there, signs on businesses that say colors only? No, we don't have that, But at the same time, then you see some things you're just like, like the George Floyd, like something like this, and you're just like, what is going on? So it's still there. It's a very fluid subject. It's very difficult. It's very complex because I understand a lot of people. I understand one side that says, hey man, enough is enough. Like, how much are we going to give them? Oh, then they're talking about reparations and,
Right. Well,
stuff.
and so what you're seeing right now, and this is of particular interest in the political sphere, and, we're approaching another election season. So we're going to see this even more. And that's why we thought it was important to have this topic now, so you can start to understand and formulate your opinions, because we have the federal government, under Joe Biden, and I'll talk about that in just a second. There's an executive order on diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility in the federal workforce. So I'm going to give some definitions. And then you have local, governments at the state level. So we have a recent example of Ron DeSantis, who wants to basically dismantle, what the federal government is trying to promote. So in this executive order, and this can be found on the White House, so wh.gov, so the whitehouse.gov, there's definitions that are provided, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
And I can pull that out. Let me see. You sent that to me, right?
Yeah.
Was it the...
I think so. Here, let me send this to you now. So you can pull it up, and people, if you're watching, you can follow along, so we're not just making up definitions of stuff.
Sourcing.
I just sent you a link.
Okay, yeah. Let's bring this up real quick. Boom.
Because, and then if you want to scroll, there are some definitions that are discussed in here that talk about underserved communities. Mm-hmm. And then if you scroll down to section 2B is where then we define the term diversity, the term equity, and the term inclusion.
Okay.
Okay. So I can read those really quick because it's very short.
But before we go in, and I know you're getting into this.
Yeah.
But the whole diversity, equity, inclusion, the reason why we're talking about this, because it needs to be explained by an expert. How long have you been doing this?
I've been consulting for almost 2 decades.
Okay. You know a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion. About a year ago, there was this whole thing about critical race theory.
Yes.
CRT. Every, right-wing media is talking about CRT, that they're making young white kids and feel bad about their whiteness. Okay. That is not true. Okay. It's a fear mongering. And I took this personal because I know you, I know what you do. I know this thing's been something that on a daily, we talk about this, about how much you're helping and how much this benefits a lot of people, and it's being weaponized.
That's right.
So I want to show you how this is being weaponized, and we'll go into what you about you explaining this. Okay. Mm-hmm. So here's Ron DeSantis, aka DeSanctimonious.
What I'll be signing is SB 266. And what this does is reorient our universities back to their traditional mission. And part of that traditional mission is to treat people as individuals, not to try to divvy them up based on any type of superficial characteristics. We're going to elevate merit and achievement above identification with certain groups. And in order to do that, we had to look at this new concept, relatively new concept, called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I didn't know much. I mean, this is something relatively recent. I mean, Chris Russo can talk about when this really started to percolate. I think it had probably been there a few years ago, but then kind of the post-BLM rioting and the George Floyd summer of 2020, I think you saw it really take off. And on its face, I mean, when I see diversity, I think different viewpoints. Have a robust academic discussion in the university. Isn't that what they're for? In reality, what this concept of DEI has been is the attempt to impose orthodoxy on the university. And not-
Okay, so a lot to unpack there.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. First of all, I understand when people who are not in politics or even on the right, and maybe even somebody who are central or even on the left, if you hear somebody, now here's one thing I will say. Ron DeSantis is a traditional politician, okay? You're going to explain things and be, well-spoken and cordial about it. Now, the way he talks about this, if you don't know, you're thinking, oh, yeah, like he's talking about, like, it shouldn't be about black and white. It should be about, your character, your merits and all that. That sounds good, but why does not. Why is that twisted?
Well, he said that DEI is a relatively new concept. That was the catalyst for that was something like the Black Lives Matter movement. And we just talked about a few minutes ago, via your definition of affirmative action, which you can look up. We're going to put all our references links into the show notes, is 60 years. And arguably prior to civil rights, there's even more examples. It was just exacerbated by the fact that during that time with Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X, and different things that ensued, that's when it became more prominent. So DEI is decades old. So to say institutionally that it's a relatively new thing is, in fact, a lie. And so it's important to point that out because that's not just based on emotion. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So,
So there's one right there where he's saying, oh, this thing, he's trying to say, well, after the George Floyd and BLM, now they want to make this whole DEI thing, It's like this new thing to make sure that people are kind of like, and they're trying to make it sound like affirmative action too, that it's like a reverse racist kind of thing. Now, I can understand why that does get kind of confusing because let's look at Me Too. Okay. When you had the Me Too movement, once one girl came out and everybody started coming out against Harvey Weinstein, now a movement was born. Okay. That happened. Now, the stuff that was going on before has been going on for a long time. But now the movement to speak up and do something about it was new. So in today's climate, you go, oh, well, you got the Me Too movement and BLM and now DEI. It's easy to go, well, all these things are popping up now to fight against white supremacists or right wing. And that's, I think when you're talking and kind of flipping it in BLM and stuff like that, you're trying to put something that it's not the same. BLM and DEI is not. It's not a movement.
No, diversity, equity, inclusion is an age-old thing. Before Aaron and I were born, okay? So, I'm sitting here talking to you at 40 years old, telling you that before I was born, all these things were going on. And there are just things in today's modern climate that are occurring that are like fuel in a fire that is inciting people's emotions around, various matters.
But why when he's saying, I don't see, it shouldn't be about color, it should be more on merit. Speak to why that is misleading.
Talking about merit is something that we can relate to, right? Absolutely. Do you want the best person for the job? Yeah, they have to meet those qualifications of having the right education, having the right talent, having the right skill level. That goes without saying, and same thing from a scholastic perspective. You're not going to choose someone who failed all the tests to get into college, but say, oh, but they're Black and they're gay or whatever it is, so they should get a free pass. That's already the standard. It's already in place. So we're saying, in addition to ensuring that these qualifications and standards are met, let's make sure that we're paying attention to the access of people who haven't had access previously. And that's what's outlined in this executive order from the federal government, right? That's why.
So let's go to that executive order again. Now let's go back to that of when you're talking about what this is. Now, this is an order that our current administration, the Biden administration, has put together, going in to kind of talk about what this is.
And so, again, just by virtue of the title of it, it's an executive order on DEI and accessibility in the federal workforce. And so there's a few things that are described. The definitions of underserved communities, and then the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So underserved communities, it's really long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in sound bites, you're talking about individuals who belong to communities of color, such as Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Native American, Indigenous, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, etc., LGBTQ. So a variety of examples are provided. And then there are shorter definitions, so I can actually read you those in full. So the term diversity means the practice of including the many communities, identities, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, abilities, cultures, and beliefs of the American people, including underserved communities. The term equity means the consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment. And finally, the term inclusion means the recognition, appreciation, and use of the talents and skills of employees of all backgrounds.
So let's bring up an example of what has made it unfair. So it's, the housing. Okay, what was done back then that made an inequality for minorities like Blacks in America?
There were lines that were drawn. You know, you can listen. You could find podcasts on this right now. During Black History Month, they promote these kind of podcasts where, you know, in places like Chicago and many other major towns, Blacks were denied loans, access to mortgages to get housing in certain areas because of the way that those lines were drawn. It was predominantly white communities. And so the reason there was the emergence of Black-owned banks was to provide access so that those people could enter into those communities. As soon as that began to happen, whites started to leave those communities because they're like, well, now Blacks are going to live here. I don't want that. I like my homogeneity. And so there were actual things happening like that, you know, and that incited the emergence of things like Black-owned banks.
Let's talk about Juneteenth. Now, Juneteenth,
it's something that is celebrated every June. And I don't know that everybody understands why we do that.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. Now, Emancipation Proclamation. Okay. So Juneteenth, commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. And it's celebrated on June 19th, on the anniversary of June 19th, 1865, in the wake of the American Civil War. So they ordered the enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. But then, hold on, let me just make sure. So you were looking at, hold on, we got to cut this. I don't even want to bring it up because I should have done research first, what it is.
It's okay.
So yeah, we'll cut this. Okay, hold on.
About the Juneteenth.
But because I'm trying to get to, remember they were talking about Black Wall Street?
Yeah.
Like there was a whole town that was burned down. Was that Juneteenth?
Oh, I don't know if that's the a correlation there.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. I'll cut this out.
Okay. But so then when we cut back, the whole point was to talk about examples.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you were trying to
Okay.
get at. So
Another thing, I believe in California, there was examples of property being seized by the government, you know, by Black families, you know, and I believe that there has been some reparations and some stuff like that. I believe they've gotten like a small, but if that family would have owned that land, you know, they would have been very wealthy. So yeah, that's a good example of why now there is inequality, why you have less wealth in the Black community, you know? So CRT, DEI, I believe these things are being used as a tool, propaganda, fearmonger, as like a negative. You know, like, oh, you know, it's like a me too, it's like a Me Too. It's a movement that's aimed to fight against whites, you know, which is just kind of dumb because you know, when you look at affirmative action and DEI, it's not just about race, you know, and it's funny because when I hear people like Ron DeSantis and people say woke, I feel like they're just grouping every racial slur together and just saying all you people who are just black, gay, you know what I mean, ghetto, all that stuff.
Anybody
You know what I mean?
who's not white.
Yes, it's like, to me, that's what I see when you hear people say, "Oh, this wokeism." It's like you're. It's almost like saying it's just like it's like the new slang word, you know, from the far right to fear monger and to have propaganda, you know, make people feel like this is something that's going to be affecting them in a negative way, you know. So in your job, this is now DEI. I believe it's something more that where the corporate, you know, America kind of understands more, kind of like, for example, sexual harassment. You know, when you have a job, when you're in corporate America, everybody has to do trainings on sexual harassment and stuff like that. Is this something like that?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I can tell you that. So there are things that are maybe you would call neutral topics, like compliance, like ethics, like, you know, cyber attacks. There's things that, you know, every single year I have to take a competency test to make sure, do I understand these things to be operating in a business of this magnitude?
Now, why do you think they have to keep doing this, like every year?
Because
should it be something like, oh, you learned math in college, now you don't have to learn it no more?
Well, you know, I'd love to say that I remember algebra and geometry and trigonometry, but by virtue of not practicing them on a regular basis.
Virtue of not practicing them. This is why we have to keep bringing this up all the time.
Right. So the reason that companies have standard procedure, to take competency tests on these things over and over again is because on the rare occasion, which is funny because there was just a cyber attack at the MGM where Aaron and I live, and that incited a whole bunch of stuff, is like things can happen. Sexual harassment happens. Compliance matters happen. And when you're in a certain position, you need to know what to do. You need to have a consciousness, not an unconscious, a conscious awareness of what to do. DEI is becoming one of those things. And the reason why, and I will tell you, every single day in my job with clients across the country, there are challenges with discrimination. I hear about it on a regular basis. So for us,
give an example.
Okay. I was in a conversation at a client in Texas. Okay. And it was Pride Month. And the discussion was around pride, and there was issue taken because the pride flag was raised. It didn't mean that the United States flag wasn't as well, but it was raised because it was in celebration of that month. And it caused a lot of feelings because on the one hand, people who are either in that community or are advocates or allies of that community felt proud that there was recognition. These people have been ostracized. There were many people who were upset because they felt like, why do we have to call out that group? Why do they get a special credence? What about all the other special groups that should have a special flag up, right? Yeah. So there was a white male that stood up in the conversation and said, well, why don't we celebrate Straight Day? Why don't we celebrate that? And there was a woman in the group who was a lesbian woman married to a woman in the military that said, I, as a lesbian woman, did not have access to medical benefits being in a loving relationship with my wife because we're gay. So, yes, it's different. We don't have the same rights. We don't have the same access. We are treated differently. And therefore, that's why we have the LGBT month, is because we want to recognize that that should not be the case. We don't celebrate Straight Day because it is a societal norm that is accepted.
Okay, so let's, I just saw a little snippet of Candace Owens on the PBD podcast, and they're looking at it as well. When you see Pride Month or Pride Parade, it's all about being flamboyant with makeup and being naked. It's when you see Pride, when you see all this stuff, it's just all about drags and naked and pasties and everybody going crazy. Not about them talking about the issues. So, and they're using that imagery to say, well, that's what it's about. It's about drags trying to, and trans trying to, corrupt your kids. So what do you say about that? Because that's something where people on the right will go and take something like that and say, well, it's not, because if you sit down and say, hey, look, we don't have the same rights and this, and then, because then they go, oh, okay, yeah, well, then I understand. But all day they've been looking on Instagram of imagery of just people who are just proud, not really bringing issues. Whereas you'll see Black History. Every time you see Black History come up in February, a lot of talk shows will bring up somebody who's invented something, who changed, America, who contributed. Do you think maybe it's getting lost? Like maybe there should be more pride, I guess, education. That's more.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, and I say this because I'm trying to think of what other people like this white guy, why he thinks that. You know what I mean? He's probably going on Instagram and Facebook and just seeing, very flamboyant, drags going out there, just having a parade and just, doing their thing. For example, this one time, I know it was this one thing where they had a stripper pole, and there was guys going on the stripper pole, on this pride parade and everything. And she's like, oh yeah, why are they doing that? Why are they taking kids? So
it was taken out of hand.
I see they're seeing that, and it's that is kind of overtaking the message, maybe, and maybe that could be discussed, but that's something I'm trying to think, why is this guy feel like this? Now, if he was more, people were giving him more examples like that, hey, these are examples, this is why we're prideful, we want to change, they may listen more. But maybe social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a multifaceted issue, and social media can either help or hinder someone's ability to understand something holistically, right? Because the point of any kind of media is to glorify things, to try to sway you, because today's media is very much about opinions. It's not just fact-based.
Yeah.
This event occurred. It's this event occurred, and you're making all kinds of stories as to why that was. And so the telling point in the example that I provided was the fact that he said, "Why don't we celebrate Straight Day?" Well, let's just take a minute to deconstruct your comment.
Why don't we celebrate Straight Day, Des?
Because straight people have not been ostracized. They have not been marginalized. They have not been, they have had rights.
Yeah.
If two people get married and they're straight, they don't have problems with getting access to medical benefits, etc. So there isn't something to be stood up for. And that is the point of people who are activists are trying to create an environment where there isn't this imbalance.
Now, you hear this all the time, too, in your company, where people feel like they have to apologize for their white privilege or apologize. It's many of you may be too young or too old, or maybe at the right age. Our listeners, you remember Saved by the Bell?
Oh, yeah.
So there was an episode where they were all being taught their backgrounds. I believe Zach was, he found out that he had some Native American background. Lisa Turtle, she was saying that her family had, they grew up as slaves, her ancestors were slaves. And then they go to Jesse and they were the slave owners. And the whole episode, she's going to Jesse, like, can I help you? Can I carry your books? Can I,
Oh, Jessie was doing that to Lisa.
Yeah, she felt so bad. She was like, well, let me help you. I apologize for what they did. Now that right there is, now that was genuine. Like, Jesse felt real bad. And then at the end, Lisa was just like, dude, like, okay,
calm down.
Buy me a car. You know what I mean? Like, and she was like, oh, you're crazy. It's like, okay, well, it's fine, Jesse. Like, you didn't do that. You know what I mean? So, and I'm glad they had that. And it's funny because it seemed very corny back in the day, but it's amazing how the message was like, it was so good that they learned about their past.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to feel
no.
Like you're a person responsible for it. But let's speak to that, because I feel like that's where a lot of the right wing or white people may feel like that. Like,
and I understand
we're being attacked because we're white. Oh,
I mean, here's the thing: if we wanted to delve into history even further, we're just talking about America.
Yeah.
We all come from different backgrounds. You have a Latino background. I have an Asian background. There's all kinds of fucked up stuff that happened in our home countries.
Yeah.
In Latin America, in Asian countries, where never mind bringing that into the fold. So there have been wrongs across all religions and races. But because we live in America, the dominant focus is on the fact that there have been historically bad situations that whites were, the conductors of. Yeah. And so my message would be, it's not about trying to sit there and apologize for the past, right? But my message is also, is in order for us to move forward, we do have to acknowledge and understand it. But once you acknowledge and understand it, the answer is to behave differently.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
There is a spectrum here.
Yeah.
Because you will have somebody, for example, let's just say if you had a friend and they said, gosh, Des, like, was it tough for you, being in coming from an Asian background, being brown, I didn't realize, there was a white privilege and, stuff like that. Like, I'm sorry if you've ever gone through anything like that, who's kind of like over acknowledging, trying to be sympathetic. You have that where somebody's like trying to be very nice about it, But then the other hand, you'll have somebody that'll take advantage of that. And we've seen all this. Like we've heard somebody say, "Oh, bro, you're trying to look at me just because I'm black."
Right. Yeah,
Or they're trying to point out like, "Oh," and it's just like, dude, it's not because of that. You're just being an asshole or some situation, So I do, and unfortunately, those examples kind of get the most noise and the most
right.
The
Well,
most
and
eyes,
you could say the same thing for our economic situations, right?
Yeah.
Where there's programs that socially help people who are having economic disparities, and then are there people who take advantage of those programs who don't deserve it? Absolutely. Are there people who need it and do things the right way and follow the appropriate processes to get food stamps and everything else? Absolutely. So there's always going to be the people who do things the wrong way and perpetuate a bad look on something. And then there's people who are righteous and follow things in a good way. And that could be said for anything, whether we're talking about race or politics or economics. But I think the point in us bringing this up today is we're all going to have our own opinions and feelings about, whether you feel like you're a person that's an ally for those that have been in misfortune and disenfranchised, or you can feel like you're the person that's like, oh gosh, I've spent my whole life apologizing and I'm tired of it. But I think it's this consciousness of saying, if we can do better at eliminating assumptions and judgments, treating people with respect and dignity, and asking better questions, then we would have more insightful conversations. That's really what it comes down to.
So now here's the thing. There wouldn't be a lot of progress if it wasn't for a good amount of white people taking action.
100%.
I mean, you look at a lot of, Lyndon B. Johnson,
Yeah.
when he there was a lot of stuff. I mean, affirmative action came with his administration. Over the years, there's been a lot of administrations and
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
yeah, but both on Republican and Democrat that have done a lot of stuff to make things happen.
Yes.
For a lot. So there has been a lot of great people who have looked at, understood the disparities, the inequality, and have actually done something about it.
Yeah.
So that's not, and again, I think my biggest thing is to just let people understand that this isn't an attack on white people,
Not at all.
But unfortunately, the country has been very polarized.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, with a lot of politics, social media, propaganda, it's weird because it's like it's so funny because you see these people that are interviewed that are just so angry. They're just like, this whole wokeism and CRT and DEI and the alphabet clan, and they just get so mad and they feel, it's like, and then you ask them like, well, what how does that affect you? What's been done to you? And they're like, well, nothing, but but because they're getting fed all this information, they feel like they're under attack. Mm-hmm. They feel, and you go back to, again, I know people don't like to hear this, but when you had World War II and the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, the reason why 6 million people, were killed is because someone was able to convince, their people that another race was affecting them, and this is, and we don't want to go back to that. People who are, they're like, oh, that'll never happen again. Yeah, but just like we have to keep practicing these things, this is why continuing education is important,
Right.
Because you don't want things to get out of hand. Mm-hmm. And we're in a situation now in our country where there's so much propaganda, there's so much fear mongering, where there are people that feel like they're under attack and they've never been personally under attack.
No.
And
that's
yeah.
why, so here's, because I want to get to our takeaways.
Yeah.
I hope that people can take this episode as the call to action to be educated, because of the fact that we have elections and things coming up. Don't be that person that says there's so much information coming at me, I'm just going to not participate in the political process. Mm-hmm. In fact, that is the absolute opposite of, you should be getting informed, looking at, look at different sources. Look at a conservative source, look at a liberal source, and try to find nonpartisan information. Yeah. Formulate an opinion based on good information that will help you to make a better choice. So that would be, a takeaway that I would recommend.
Now, you being in corporate, it's funny because we're in two different industries. Mm-hmm. When topics are being discussed in your industry, it's very formal. In mine, it's very informal, So if you are a person that, let's just say you're more right-wing, okay, right-leaning, okay, conservative and white, is it okay to go to somebody and just say, hey, you know what? Let me just ask someone who is gay, who is black, some questions. Would you recommend that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or would you? Because here's the thing, I think sometimes it's just like, man, you know what? Just ask somebody. Is that rude?
No, because if everybody did that and got curious, we would probably cure a lot of the
But let's
problems.
keep it real though. There's a lot of times where people go like, man, should I even ask them that question?
Well, now, how are
I mean?
you asking the question,
Well,
right?
And this is kind of where I'm getting at now. I mean, I do feel like, if you want to ask, some questions, like for example, let's just say this guy in Texas you were talking about, he was able to put a question out there to all the
TQIA plus.
TQIA plus. Sorry, it's the tongue twisting. But I want to make sure I get it right. What if you just went out there and put a video out on Facebook or Instagram and said, why do you guys have to be so flamboyant? Why does the pride parades have to be so like elaborate and crazy with nudity and everything?
Okay, so when you're posing a question, being accusatory isn't going to help your cause, right?
Yeah, okay.
You're assuming something that you don't understand. So if you take the position of being curious, if you ask 10 different LGBT people right now, they may tell you a little bit of different things. One person can be extremely flamboyant. One person you might not even know was gay.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't assume all are created equal, because if there's one thing that you take away from this episode as well, is there's two sides to every story.
Yeah.
There's the president of the United States and there's white trash. There's a black person in the ghetto and there's black senators, and same can be said for every single race. So there's a spectrum for everything. So you can, one flamboyant gay person doesn't represent all gay population.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like, it would be ignorant for you to allow one, perception of something to color your entire understanding.
Do you feel like it's difficult for a lot of people in your company or, the space that you do? Do you feel like there are white people that feel like they don't know how to ask the questions? Like, I don't want to ask. Like, let me just go along with it and just apologize.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so they're coming from the right place.
Yeah.
Their heart's in the right place. They're not resisting. They're wanting to be people who understand. And it's just as simple as tell me your story, right? Understand someone's story, understand who they are and what they stand for. And that's it. If you're going into it with genuine curiosity, you're going to walk away with better information than if you were to assume something about someone. So that's the best advice that I could give. Right?
Yeah. And I think it's really good because I have seen this trend right now. Bill Maher, Bill Maher,
Yeah.
Bill Maher, PBD podcast, Patrick, they try to interview a lot of different people, to get those conversations started, which is really good. I like that because I think going in the right direction, you just have to have conversation.
And if you can do that, you will find a lot of things that you may have assumed or you think can shift. One of the great examples, and you could type this in and probably learn a lot more about it, and I'll just give you a soundbite, is that Oprah at one point interviewed people from the KKK. She thought it was a terrible mistake because she's like, I'm a platform that promotes unity and harmony and togetherness, and now I'm bringing these divisive people on the show. But what she did was decide to do a follow-up episode with some of those members. And one of the members in the group had changed their mind and their viewpoints. And the reason for that was because when they had been imprisoned, the one person that actually helped in that situation was a black person.
Yeah.
And so because he had a personal experience that showed him the good quality and the support that a black person could give to a white person, it changed his whole perception. That's because he had an interaction that he hadn't before.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think there's a lot of, for me, I think just showing trying to put an awareness out there that there are people who are using these tactics, fear-monger and propaganda, to make people feel uncomfortable, to create a divide.
Yeah.
So that they can gain power. So this is, you have to, and just like this Ron DeSantis clip, anybody who watches that clip that doesn't really know what's going on, or maybe just didn't seem like there's like any problem. They're thinking, oh yeah, like let's definitely have diversity and let's talk, because you hear that, it's like, hey, don't judge me on my skin, judge me on my character. And then he kind of says that like, oh, well, we're trying to judge you on your character. But the way it's being used,
Right. Right.
It's very slick, and it's something that a lot of politicians do.
Right.
You know, you put something and make it sound like it's benefiting. You know,
Now, if we only heard that part of it,
Yeah.
okay, because this is what social media is, right?
sound bites.
You take a sound bite of a clip and you take that 10 seconds and you go, wow, this guy makes a ton of sense because that statement makes
Yeah.
a ton of sense.
But in the same breath, he goes, DEI is something that started around BLM and
in
the George
2020,
Floyd riots.
like
You know what I mean? So
3 years ago?
yeah. So there is, I mean, and this is where I hope we help you all who are listening just kind of decipher the information, you know? And hey, I mean, I if you're somebody who is like, look, you know, I just don't believe that there should be, you know, a marriage should be between a man and a woman. That's how we were created. We shouldn't do that, or that shouldn't be something that's promoted. And I, you know, there are a lot of parents that are like, hey, you know, I want to be able to raise my kids and not be influenced by all these people, you know, kind of making them feel like, you know, it's a cool thing to be trans or gay. You know, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of this, you know. I get if you have a certain view, and that's fine. You know, that it's okay. And even when just like what Oprah did, we talked about the CNN interview that this guy did. I forgot his name, but he went to a KKK community, sat down at a diner, and had a great conversation. You know, and there was an understanding, and it was respect, because he was like, look, I have nothing against blacks. They're cool, everything. This is just the way I feel. I just want, you know, to be in a white community, and it's where I feel comfortable. This is what I like.
It's just comfort.
That's fine. That's, you know, nobody's trying to force you to be progressive, open-minded,
Or believe something that you
Gay.
just fundamentally don't believe.
Yeah, you know, that's not where a lot of people and a lot of these groups are coming from. I mean, I believe that like the LGBTQ community is not trying to make kids turn gay. They're just trying
Now,
to.
what they are trying to do, and I want that to be an undertone of our show, just to
Yeah.
be clear. So if we ever talk about something, it's not convincing, you know, people to go change and, you know, now believe in this other religion or sexual preference, but it is to say we can coexist.
Yes.
Because what a LGBT person is doing is helping that person who is suffering in silence, that is gay or has, you know, something about them that's different and is unable to live fully in their essence and their being because of where they're from and because of the judgment and the ridicule that they'll get, is to know that there are people like you that support you that you can turn to, right? That's the point that these groups are trying to make. It's not to try to change your view. It's to try to help you understand that these people do exist and they should be respected, and you should be able to coexist with them, right? That's
So-
the point.
DEI is not a bad thing.
No.
It's not it's a conspiracy movement to try to get to try to make sure that that I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, you know, well, and as far as, you know, as far as this bill that was passed down in Florida, it was, you know, they're trying to defund diversity. They're trying to take away your position.
Yeah, basically.
So you're not teaching people about equality.
And what allyship means, for example.
Now, okay, let's use this as an example, okay?
Okay.
Right now, Ron DeSantis passed that bill for schools not to have
Public schools, yeah.
public schools, not private.
Well, that particular thing was talking about public schools.
Okay. Not to have diversity, equity, inclusion, people like you in that space. So what do you think would happen if your company eliminated your position? How would that affect your community or your company?
The status quo would perpetuate, right?
Meaning,
Meaning,
elaborate on that.
yeah, whatever inequalities, microaggressions, unconscious bias that currently exist will stay in existence, right? It isn't until you become aware of something, address it, and change it, then we can have change.
Yeah.
And so the point of, luckily there are other functions that I do at my job. So hopefully that means something. But a good portion of my time I spend on this because of the fact that there isn't an understanding. There's people that have been highly educated in many other ways, but when it comes to this subject matter, they don't know what these different words mean. And so it's the first time that they're having higher consciousness conversations with the people around them.
So you're not paid by BLM and trying to infiltrate a company, trying to get blacks to get jobs over white people?
Not at all.
No. Okay.
Not at all.
I just want to make sure I set the record straight.
Yeah. I mean, like you could talk about what your takeaway is. I mean, I certainly will probably reiterate what mine is before we land with our tip of the week. But mine is have higher consciousness. Be a continuous student of information about this subject matter, as you could tell, because we're pretty passionate about it, but everything that's around you. If you maintain a mindset of intellectual curiosity, you're going to be positioned to have better, more quality interactions with people. So that would be my
and it does suck because this is where I'm kind of coming from. There are people that are working, trying to raise a family. They may have some goals, or they're trying to run a household, and then the hour to 30 minutes they have to sit down, watch some TV or go on social media, they hear this stuff. So you're getting hit with a lot of this information that just kind of distorts a lot of stuff. And I understand. I think this is the one thing that I kind of want to just really put out there is, before, I was guilty of this. It was very angry at how a lot of these people would follow this mess. But then you start going like, well, when you keep telling somebody something, it's almost like a victim of bad information. So I think for me, it's just trying to let's have the conversation. Let's have a conversation with people so that they can get a different view, maybe firsthand instead of hearing it from somebody like that.
Yeah.
So I think to me it's not an attack. It's just a let's just start having tough conversations. So
to expand your perspective, right?
Yeah, because it's not going to change overnight. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of this propaganda. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of laws that get passed. There's going to be a lot of fear mongering. There's going to be more of this. I mean, there's a big fight right now with a lot of big issues in this country where the Supreme Court has to make a ruling on. And then unfortunately you hear, there's, Supreme Court justices being, giving these lavish gifts, you're hearing, a lot of stuff where a lot of politics. Now, here's the thing. One thing I will say with social media and all this is a lot of people are being called out now. Everybody's under the microscope now. The spotlight's everywhere now. You do something bad, people are going to hear about it. Back then, if you look at past presidents, how much did you know about Bush's daughters? How much did you know about, Barack Obama's daughters? Bill Clinton's daughter. Like, you knew about them, but they weren't in the spotlight. Now everybody's in the spotlight.
Right. Right.
Which
for better, for worse.
which could be good because it's kind of like putting everybody in Washington. Like, now, you know what? Everybody's watching now. You do something, or people do something in your family, it can affect everything. So, hopefully it'll help politicians kind of like scare them straight a little bit,
Yeah.
But at the same time, this isn't going to go away overnight. There's still going to be a lot of bad information out there. There's a lot of agendas. There's a lot of, things that people have an agenda to make people, to scare people to vote a certain way,
right?
Or to not vote. I just hope that we can kind of, piece by piece, there has to be that counteract. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have to do a better job of finding common ground. We really do. Because the one thing that disappoints me so much about the rhetoric that is out there is how divisive it is. That's the issue that is so problematic. It's asking everybody to choose a lane, and if you choose to understand and to expand your perspective, then we can have better harmony. It's possible.
And you know what, man? I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of people. it sucks. They don't even know that they're voting against themselves, man. You know, when you had people that were just so against Obamacare, come to find out that there were some people that needed it the most.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So there's a lot of examples like that, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of these people are voting against themselves, and in the long run, it's going to make it harder.
Yeah.
For them, you know.
Yeah. But we want your feedback. You know,
Yes.
we shared our perspective today. We wanted to provide you with different sources. You know, let us know. You can go to our DM at Born Unbreakable on Instagram. You could drop us a note there. You know, like I said, we will have information in the show notes. We want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Good, bad, indifferent, ugly, whatever. You know, we want that.
Yeah, and it's okay to troll and do bad comments for me. I know they're coming. I can see all the bad comments.
But I mean,
you
it's
suck.
it's yeah. I mean, we want it all. We want the encouragement.
But you won't be getting any bad comments.
And it's
You know,
I don't know. I mean,
But it's-
maybe today people was a little.
It's
little
okay,
extra.
yeah.
But you know, I want to land on a tip of the week because Aaron and I just came back from a conference called the Summit of Greatness. It was in Columbus, Ohio. We saw a tremendous amount of incredible speakers, and there was one that really struck us. Her name's Vanessa Van Edwards. Find her on Instagram. She's a behavioral scientist, and she did a study. It was interesting. It was actually about what made popular kids popular in high school, which I was like, ooh, where is this going? And what she found, it wasn't because, you know, of their talents and their gifts and abilities, because they were the football star or the cheerleader. It was actually because they went out of their way to find things about people that they like. And so by nature of putting the focus on others to learn about them, they were popular. And so I wanted to leave that as a tip because it ties nicely into this topic about DEI, which is if you have the intention to go and find something good about someone that you like, the likelihood of you having, you know, better interactions.
Which isn't it
is good.
ironic? Because that's what politics was back then. When you ran for president, you were going shaking hands, you were hugging little babies, you know, you were doing all this stuff. You were trying to appeal to everybody, you know, liking everybody, you know, to be liked, to get voted. Now it's just like
It's like the opposite, as you
fuck
know.
the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people are finding
Today's politics has been like the East Coast, West Coast with Biggie and Tupac, man.
Politics has become spending more time talking shit about everyone else instead of focusing on the agenda that you have about what you're going to do differently to impact people and to make people like you because of what you're going to do with education, immigration, and all the topics that matter.
Now it worked. Okay, it worked, but in the long run, it's just caused a bunch of divide. You know? So, yeah.
So find things that you like about people. There.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I hope I did way better in this episode.
I thought you did great.
I felt a little bit better. I feel like I did pretty good switching. I try to keep the camera more on you than me.
Well, yeah, I try to talk and not pay attention too much to the
I
technology.
don't know if I like my close up.
It's
Hide behind a microphone right here.
No,
Yeah.
that's, we want you to see us so you can get to know us.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of video. If you are watching us on video, we want you to see that we're authentic in the way that we talk, the way that we feel about something, whether it's funny, whether it's, sad, whatever it is. But, we always want to leave you with that message of the fact that action is what you're capable of doing. So if there's something that you learn from an episode, apply it. Apply it to your life. Do something differently so that you could be better. And as always, I have to put it out there. If you found value in this, please share it. Please share it with other people because you can help somebody to expand their understanding of DEI, and that's only going to make the world better. So,
in the words of Coach Dez, just be a good person.
Just be a good person.
Right. That's episode 2, you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please subscribe, like, you know what to do. Everybody knows what to do now.
That's right.
This past week has been really good. There's so much that we're working on.
Yeah.
So excited to bring you guys so much more in the next coming months and years. We're definitely in the long game.
Yep.
We've been talking about this. This podcast show is just step one. So very excited. And if you guys want to keep supporting, again, this is, I like that we get to offer this for free.
Absolutely.
You just go to Spotify, go to Apple, go to YouTube, and it's free.
Yeah.
So we love it. So all we ask is just for your support and just growing this channel and helping the algorithm,
That's right.
pushing it. So if you guys support, definitely just like and share and subscribe. I'm DJ F&A.
And I'm Coach Des.
Hold on. This is,
Oh, that's
I
your.
gotta have my moment.
Oh, that's your thing.
Now here's your
Now I
moment.
have to do a dance?
There you go.
Okay, so you did this, and then I could do like a little lasso.
This is the Unbreakable podcast show. DJ F&A signing out.
Peace.
Peace.